My parents handed my twin all, then called me the strong enough to need nothing, so I proved them right by leaving and watched all fall apart without me. I'm a 29-year-old man working as a software engineer. I grew up in a mid-sized upper-middle-class town with my twin brother, Caleb. From the outside, we probably looked like the kind of family you'd see in commercials, a clean house, matching school uniforms, and annual beach vacations. But anyone paying close attention would have noticed the cracks early on. Caleb always got the bigger slice of everything. At birthdays, his gifts were flashier and more expensive. He got a new mountain bike when I got a secondhand skateboard. When we both won a regional science fair in 5th grade, my parents framed Caleb's certificate and told him they were proud. Mine sat in my backpack for weeks before I eventually threw it out. They didn't ask why I didn't hang mine. They didn't even notice. As we got older, it only became more obvious. Caleb had private tennis lessons, music tutors, and summer coding boot camps in different cities. I was told those things were unnecessary for me, that I was already so responsible and didn't need the extra help. Every time I asked to join one of Caleb's activities or try something new, the answer was some version of, "You're better off figuring things out on your own." By high school, Caleb was being flown out to international robotics competitions. My biggest extracurricular was working a part-time job at the local bookstore to save up for a laptop. We both applied to the same Ivy League college and got accepted, which was probably the first time I felt like I'd actually caught up to him on paper. But when it came time to sort out finances, everything snapped back to the usual pattern. My parents paid for everything for Caleb: tuition, housing, meal plans, even a monthly stipend so he could focus on studying. I asked if they'd be helping me too. They said no. They wanted to teach me how to be self-sufficient. They refused to co-sign any of my financial aid paperwork. I ended up juggling 2 part-time jobs and scraping together scholarships. I took out loans, worked nights and weekends, and shared a tiny dorm room with 4 other guys while Caleb had a private studio off campus, fully furnished, with rent covered. After graduation, Caleb was gifted a brand new car and a 2-bedroom condo downtown. I got a silver wristwatch and a handwritten card that said, "We're proud of you too." No explanation, no acknowledgement of the years I'd spent grinding just to survive the same school he breezed through with a safety net. I said, "Thank you," and went back to my 1-bedroom rental across town. Over time, I stopped answering family group chats unless it was about holiday plans. I made myself scarce at dinners and birthdays. It wasn't that I didn't care, I just didn't see the point anymore. No matter how well I did, they acted like it was expected. Caleb's minor wins were hyped up like headlines. My promotions got barely a nod. I started at a mid-tier tech firm, worked long hours, and eventually landed a senior engineering role. I didn't tell my parents right away. I knew what the reaction would be. Some vague, distracted "that's nice" before they changed the topic to whatever Caleb was trying next. And there was always something new with Caleb: a crypto startup that tanked, a photography business that never launched, a podcast series that stopped after 2 episodes. My parents funded every single one, paid off his debts, covered his rent, and refilled his bank account every time he overdrafted it. I once made a comment about how maybe they were enabling him. My mother told me he's just trying to find his path. "Not everyone's as lucky as you," she said. I didn't know what to say to that. Lucky? Then a few weeks ago, we had dinner together at their place. Caleb was late, as usual. My dad poured wine, and my mom made small talk about the weather, their neighbors, whatever came to mind. Out of nowhere, my mom turned to me and said, "You know, you were always our favorite." It hit me harder than I thought it would. I didn't know how to react. I asked what she meant, and my dad chimed in with some half-baked explanation about how they pushed me because I could handle it and supported Caleb because he needed it more. They acted like it was some kind of parenting master plan, that I was chosen to be the strong one and Caleb was the delicate flower. That night, I sat in my apartment and tried to figure out if that label, the favorite, was supposed to mean something to me, because it didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like a way to justify everything. All the times I had to struggle, all the years I had to be the adult, while Caleb got to stumble through life with backup plans. I started going through old emails, receipts, and bank statements. Not for revenge, I just wanted to see it for what it was. Over a decade of proof that being the favorite didn't mean being chosen. It meant being used, and once I started looking, the pattern wasn't hard to find. After that dinner where my parents casually called me their favorite, I gave it a week. Then I asked to meet them again, this time at my apartment, not theirs. No distractions, no Caleb. I didn't raise my voice or make it emotional. I just laid everything out in order. The private coaching, the travel expenses, the apartment, the tuition, the condo, the brand new car, the endless startups. I listed the jobs I had to work in college, the loans I was still paying off, and the number of times I'd been told to figure it out while Caleb got bailed out again and again. They didn't argue with the facts, they just shrugged. My father said Caleb needed help because he wasn't like me. My mother said they always knew I would be fine, that I didn't need the same kind of support. According to them, they had to push me to build character while giving Caleb a cushion because he wasn't built for struggle. The next day, Caleb texted me. He said he heard I'd finally admitted how hard things were for him. He sounded proud, like I'd given him a trophy. I told him I hadn't said anything close to that. He replied with a laughing emoji and said I didn't get it. Then he blocked me everywhere, texts, calls, social media, every app. Just like that, gone. The next message I got from him came through a business email tied to his brand account. I didn't reach out again. I didn't try to get unblocked. I didn't need to. I'd already pulled away from him years ago. This just made it official. A few days after that, my mother called. She didn't ask how I was. She wanted to know if I'd thought about forgiving Caleb. She brought up the twin bond, how we'd shared a womb and a birthday and a family. She didn't mention the way that bond had been one-sided for almost 3 decades. I told her this wasn't about one fight. This was about everything they never saw because they never wanted to. She didn't argue, she just hung up. 2 days later, a group text came in from my dad's number. He invited both me and Caleb to a weekend at a lake house they had rented. Said it was a good chance for us to reconnect as brothers. The way it was worded felt like a commercial. No apology, no context, just a weekend trip like none of this had happened. I replied that I wouldn't be going. No long explanation, no debate. I left the group after that. Around that same time, a coworker showed me an article Caleb had posted online. It was an announcement for a new luxury streetwear brand he was launching. He had a new website, an Instagram page with teaser shots, and a short video showing him talking about vision and legacy. I recognized the condo in the background, still funded by our parents. The launch post listed him as the founder and creative director. It also listed 3 full-time employees, 2 freelance designers, and a marketing lead. None of those things come cheap. I didn't need to ask where the money came from. That same week, I booked a therapy session for the first time in my life. I found a practice near my office that took evening appointments. I didn't go to vent. I went to understand what all of this had done to me without me realizing it. The therapist listened, asked a few questions, and called what I described covert neglect. She said it was common in families where one child is seen as self-sufficient and the other as fragile. The problem is, one gets abandoned emotionally, while the other is babied into dysfunction. After that session, I started going through everything: photos, emails, receipts, texts. I made a folder. I started keeping a record of the difference in how we were treated. It wasn't for revenge. I just needed to see it clearly for myself. I went through bank records, pulled up old tuition invoices, remembered how many rent payments Caleb never had to make. After going through tuition records, housing costs, startup expenses, and travel receipts, I estimated over $250,000 in support had gone to him, maybe more. I had never been offered anything like that, not once. I didn't confront my parents with a number. I didn't send them screenshots or make a speech. I just kept collecting. I wanted clarity, not chaos. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was short, just said her name was Vanessa and that she used to date Caleb. She asked if I had time to meet soon, said there were things I deserved to know. I stared at the message for a while. Then I checked the area code. It matched the city. I looked at the name again. I remembered Caleb mentioning her once, a long time ago. I told her I could meet later that week. She agreed. I didn't know what she was going to say, but something told me this wasn't just a casual chat. Vanessa picked the cafe near my office. It was a small place, quiet, barely half full, with a view of the intersection. She was already seated when I walked in, holding a cup with both hands. She looked like someone who'd rehearsed what she was going to say more than once. She got to the point fast. Caleb had lied to her for most of their relationship. According to him, he was the stable twin. He told her he'd been helping me out financially since college, said he'd paid off one of my loans and even helped cover a few of my job relocations. He painted himself as the one holding the family together behind the scenes, while I was the unreliable one who never appreciated it. Then she opened her phone and showed me a set of screenshots, group messages with Caleb and his friends. One of them had him calling me a boring desk guy who got lucky, while he referred to himself as the real success story in the family. Another message said something about how I only worked in tech because I was afraid of real risk. I didn't say much. She kept scrolling. There was a message from a few months back where Caleb claimed he couldn't afford a trip because Vanessa had bled him dry, and that he needed to go back to our parents for another loan. It was right around the time I remembered seeing him post pictures from a trip to Tulum. She said when they broke up, he blamed her for holding him back, used their breakup to paint himself as the victim, then turned around and got even more money from our parents by saying he was in recovery. He even mentioned possibly going to therapy to keep up the act, though as far as she knew that never happened before we left. She sent me a zip folder with all the screenshots. She said she didn't want anything from me, just that I deserved to see what he was saying behind my back. I thanked her, then I added everything to the folder I'd been building. I didn't do anything with most of it, but I picked one screenshot, just one, and forwarded it to my parents with a short message: "This is what you've been enabling." A few hours later, my mother replied. The message was short. She told me not to involve them in drama. That was the word she used, drama. My father didn't reply at all. The next day, I brought it up in therapy, not the messages specifically, but everything else around it. I told my therapist that I didn't want to send anything else to my parents, not unless they were willing to talk to me like adults without dodging or spinning things. She agreed. She said this wasn't about proving a point anymore. That weekend, I saw Caleb's brand all over social media. He had posted promotional photos of the clothing line. The captions were dramatic: "Built from struggle, grind never stops, turning pain into product." Our parents were in the comments under every post, fire emojis, heart emojis, encouragement. My name didn't come up anywhere. Neither did my recent promotion at work. I had lunch with a coworker I trusted. I told him some of what had been going on. He asked why I never talked about any of this before. I didn't have a good answer. I'd just gotten used to keeping things to myself. That night, I opened a blank document and wrote a letter. Not one to send, just one to get it all out. I wrote about what it felt like to be treated like I didn't need anything, what it looked like to watch someone stumble through life with a safety net, while being told I should be proud of my independence. A few days later, Vanessa messaged me again. She apologized for not telling me sooner, said she thought I already knew. I told her I appreciated it. We ended up talking for about half an hour, not about Caleb, but about how messed up it is when someone manipulates everyone around them and still gets rewarded for it. It felt good to talk to someone who didn't need a long explanation. She'd lived it too. I wasn't just imagining the way Caleb twisted reality. She'd been on the other end of it, same as me. Then the next group message came in. It was from my dad's number again. This time, it was an invite to Caleb's official business launch. A big event, apparently. There was a venue, catering, a live DJ. The message called it a mandatory family event. Not a request, not an invitation, mandatory. No apology, no check-in, just an order. Like the last few weeks hadn't happened. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the message, then went back to the folder on my desktop, the one where I'd saved everything. This wasn't over, but I knew exactly what I'd do next. I replied to the group message about Caleb's launch party with 4 words: "I won't be attending." I didn't follow it up with a reason. I didn't ask questions or argue. A few minutes later, my father replied with a single word: "Noted." About an hour after that, my mother sent a separate message saying how the family was falling apart and that I was feeding the distance. I left the messages unread after that. 2 days later, I got a call from my mother's sister. We hadn't spoken in a long time. She usually stayed out of things. She said she wasn't calling to change my mind, just to say she understood. She'd seen the differences growing up too, how Caleb was treated like glass and I was treated like iron. She told me she should have spoken up earlier but didn't want to cause more tension in the family. Before she hung up, she said she hoped I wouldn't back down now, not after all these years. That weekend, while Caleb was hosting his launch party, Vanessa sent me a screenshot of a post he made. It was a photo of him standing in front of a decorated backdrop with his logo in the corner. The caption read, "Some people can't handle success, but I'll keep building anyway." She sent another message a few minutes later with a video from the event. Caleb was on stage giving a short speech. He thanked the crowd for coming, talked about self-made hustle, and claimed he bought his condo with the early earnings from the brand. I saved the video to my folder and didn't say anything. There wasn't much left to be shocked by. At therapy, I walked through the last few weeks, not just the launch or the lies, but the long-term pattern. I'd always been the one who was expected to take the hit, stay quiet, make peace. Caleb caused chaos and got help. I solved my own problems and got ignored. That session hit different. My therapist told me to start writing down specific patterns, not just memories, so I did. I started a new section in my journal, just for tracking the language and behavior I'd grown up around. 2 days later, one of my cousins called. He heard a rumor I was being offered a new job in another city and wanted to know if it was true. I didn't confirm anything, just asked where he heard it. Apparently, someone from the family had mentioned it in passing, and now everyone was wondering why I hadn't told anyone. I didn't explain, I just let him talk. After we hung up, I took another look at the offer letter I had been sitting on for a week. It was a leadership role at a company in a different city, with better pay and a bigger team. The job came with relocation support, housing connections, and even a signing bonus. I scheduled apartment viewings, booked 2 days off, and made a trip out there the following week. The new city was quieter, cleaner. It felt like space, not just physical but mental. I toured 3 apartments. One of them had huge windows facing the skyline, a walkable neighborhood, and no family photos on the walls. I put down a deposit before flying back. Back home, Caleb stayed silent. No calls, no messages, no sudden change of heart. My parents didn't ask about the job. I never told them. They wouldn't have cared, or worse, they would have found a way to make it about Caleb. I updated my lease termination, filed my 2-week notice, and started wrapping up projects at work. A few coworkers were surprised but supportive. I didn't say much about the family stuff. Most of them knew me as the quiet, dependable guy. I was fine with keeping it that way. I talked to my therapist again before the move. She asked what I hoped to find in the new city. I told her I wasn't looking for anything. I was just letting go of what I'd been carrying too long. She nodded and said, "That's what freedom is, when you stop asking for permission to breathe." The last night before I left, I packed the folder into a box labeled personal. It wasn't for revenge. It was for remembering what I wouldn't allow again. No goodbyes, no send-offs. I didn't expect any. I booked the movers, signed the lease on the new place, and updated my address with HR. For the first time, I could picture what life might look like without any of them in it. Not because I was angry, but because I was done trying to fit where I was never meant to stay. I flew into the new city on a Thursday morning and went straight from the airport to my first apartment tour. The air felt different, cooler, cleaner, no reminders of anyone I'd grown up with. Just unfamiliar streets, new buildings, and the quiet kind of noise that doesn't follow you home. By the second showing, I already knew this was the place I wanted to be. While I was checking out a unit with an open balcony view, my phone rang. It was one of my cousins, the same one who'd called about the job rumor. He asked if I'd heard what happened at Caleb's launch party. I said no. He said I probably wouldn't believe it. Apparently, one of Caleb's investors pulled out just a few hours before the event started. Word got around fast, and instead of adjusting or staying professional, Caleb lost it. He started blaming people for the bad energy, then told a few guests that my absence had jinxed the launch. He even snapped at our parents mid-speech, accusing them of not supporting him enough, loud enough for other guests to hear. By the end of the night, half the people had left early, some without saying goodbye. His brand manager deleted all the promo posts the next morning, and the website that had just launched quietly went offline. My cousin said it was one of the most awkward family events he'd ever been to. I didn't say much. I thanked him for the heads up and ended the call. Later that night, a message came through from a number I didn't recognize. It looked like a business account, something like info, followed by a brand name tied to Caleb. The message was short. They asked if I would consider issuing a statement online to support Caleb, to help clarify public misunderstanding, and remind people that family supports family. I blocked the number immediately and saved a screenshot to the folder I'd been keeping. The next morning, I signed the lease for the apartment I liked the most. I put in my notice at work that same day. 4 weeks until the move, no social media post, no email to family. I didn't even tell my parents there was nothing to explain that weekend. Vanessa reached out again. She told me Caleb had tried contacting her, new number, new email. He framed himself as someone abandoned, said everyone had turned against him. She blocked him on everything after that. She thanked me again for listening and helping her see that it hadn't just been her. The pattern went deeper than their relationship. It was the way Caleb operated, the way our family protected him from consequences. We didn't talk long, just enough to know we were both moving on from the same storm in different directions. While packing, I went through the last of my storage boxes. Inside one was a faded birthday card. I opened it and immediately recognized the handwriting. The front had cartoon balloons and a slice of cake. Inside it was signed, "Love, Mom and Caleb." My name wasn't mentioned at all. I flipped it over just to double check. Nothing. The date on it matched my 10th birthday. I took a photo of it and dropped it into the folder with the rest. Then I sat on the floor for a while, just looking at the open box. That night, I didn't do much. No distractions, no music, just let everything sit for a bit. I didn't plan it, I just needed space. Not just from my family, but from the weight of trying to keep track of all the small, invisible ways I'd been erased over time. The next few days went by fast. I shipped out furniture, updated my address, closed out old accounts, and packed the rest of my things into labeled boxes. I donated what I didn't need and shredded old paperwork I'd been holding on to out of habit. I kept the folder though, not because I needed proof anymore, but because, for the first time, I was leaving something without looking back. No explanations, no guilt trips, no chance to be roped back into a role I never chose. I didn't tell anyone when my last day at work came. I just handed in my badge, shook a few hands, and took the elevator down like it was any other Tuesday. Moving day was quiet. The movers arrived on time, packed quickly, and we were on the road before noon. I had one box on the seat next to me, documents, the folder, and the photo of the condo listing I'd framed as a reminder of what starting over looked like. Nothing about the past few months had been easy. But for the first time, I wasn't stuck explaining myself to people who had already decided what I was worth. The city ahead didn't owe me anything, and that's exactly why I chose it. The movers left just after sunset. I stood in the middle of my new apartment, surrounded by unopened boxes, and the kind of silence that didn't feel like pressure. No calls asking for favors, no check-ins loaded with guilt, just a quiet space that was finally mine without anyone else's fingerprints on it. I spent the next 2 days setting it up exactly how I wanted. Small framed prints I'd never hung before, a bookshelf I built myself, a kitchen stocked with things I actually use. I bought a rug in a color my mother once said clashes with everything, and put it right in the middle of the living room. A few days into my new job, I came back from lunch and found a handwritten envelope sitting on my desk. No return address, no postage. The handwriting was familiar. Inside was a letter from my mother. It was long, a lot of words without saying much. She wrote about how the family used to be close, how things were different when we were younger. She said she missed when the boys got along. There was no mention of how one boy got everything and the other got told to be stronger. The letter focused on how Caleb was having a hard time. She said he wasn't eating right, wasn't sleeping, had lost weight. She didn't ask how I was, just said Caleb needed his brother. As if I was still supposed to be the one to fix what she wouldn't admit was broken. I added the letter to my folder and didn't respond. That weekend, a few people from work invited me to a small get-together at someone's apartment. Nothing big, just snacks, music, a few drinks. I went, thinking I'd stay for half an hour. I ended up staying the whole evening. We played card games and talked about weekend hobbies. No one brought up family. No one asked about childhood. No one looked at me like I owed them anything. A few nights later, I got a single text from an unknown number. It was short, said not to abandon the family over misunderstandings. The phrasing gave it away. It was from my father. I blocked the number immediately. No more circles, no more door left open just in case. That door is shut now, and it's going to stay that way. Then Caleb tried using a business email account that wasn't connected to the ones he had blocked me on. I got an email from one of his business addresses, the same brand that had gone silent after the failed launch. He wrote that he was restructuring his team and wanted to know if I would be open to joining as a consultant. He said I had tech insight that could elevate the platform. It wasn't an apology, it was a pitch. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to my therapist. She answered later that evening, "You are not crazy. You've just been trained to doubt your reality." That was it. No over-explaining, no walking on eggshells. Just a reminder that being treated like a utility is not the same as being wanted. The next morning, I started writing a personal essay. Not for work, not for anyone else, just for myself. I titled it, "I Was the Favorite in Theory, the Backup Plan in Practice." I didn't try to make it poetic, I just laid it all out. The uneven birthday parties, the skipped graduations, the wristwatch, and card next to a car in a condo, the years of being told I was fine, while Caleb was handed safety nets every time he stumbled. While unpacking my last box, I found a small folder labeled Childhood. Inside were a few drawings from elementary school. One stood out, 2 stick figure boys holding hands. One had a crooked crown drawn above his head. In shaky handwriting it said, "Me and my brother." I didn't throw it away. I didn't put it on display either. I folded it gently, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. Not out of nostalgia, just closure. I was going through emails one morning when a LinkedIn notification popped up on my phone. It said someone had used my name as a referral on a job application submitted to my company. I clicked the alert and saw Caleb's full name listed. Same resume, same fake job title he always used. Under the referral section, he'd written my name and job title, like we were close or I'd vouched for him personally. I forwarded the alert to Human Resources with a short explanation. I told them we were estranged due to long-standing family issues and that I hadn't spoken to him in a long time. They got back to me within the hour, The application had already been flagged for review. He'd left several sections blank and used an outdated business email. They assured me it wouldn't go anywhere and thanked me for the clarification. That night, I checked one of Caleb's social accounts out of curiosity. I didn't follow him, but one of my old college classmates had forwarded me a post. Caleb had written a long caption with a black and white photo of himself looking out a window. The caption said something vague about bitter people trying to block blessings and how loyalty isn't in everyone's blood. He didn't mention names, but the tone made it obvious. I blocked the account and removed the classmate who forwarded it. I didn't send an explanation. I just didn't want to be dragged back into a space where people fed off drama without context. At therapy that week, I brought it up, not out of anger, just to mark it. We talked about how different my response had been this time. No spiral, no need to prove anything, just handled it and moved on. My therapist called it a sign of integration. I called it finally being done. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. The handwriting was neat and careful. The return address was from a woman I hadn't seen since I was a teenager, someone from our old church group. Inside, she wrote that she'd heard what was happening in the family and hoped I'd consider rebuilding the bond between me and Caleb. She said forgiveness was holy, that twins were a gift from God, that letting go of hurt was the only path to peace. I replied once. I thanked her for reaching out, but told her that spiritual encouragement couldn't erase what had been ignored for decades. I didn't go into details. I just made it clear that this wasn't about bitterness. It was about survival. Later that week, Vanessa sent a brief message, just a link to a screenshot showing that Caleb's clothing brand website was now offline. The Instagram page was gone too. Apparently, their parents had finally stopped covering the bills. She didn't add anything else. She didn't have to. I archived the screenshot and moved on, not out of satisfaction, but because it confirmed something I'd already known. No amount of support could build something for someone who didn't want to do the work themselves. My mother's sister checked in around the same time, a short phone call. She told me the family was in chaos. Group chats were full of finger-pointing, old arguments resurfacing, a lot of tension without anyone actually naming the core issue. She told me she didn't blame me for stepping away. I told her gently that I wasn't coming back, not to fix it, not to translate it, not to soften the fallout. It wasn't mine to hold anymore. At work, I finalized the paperwork for my promotion. It was official, new title, better pay, and my own small team. I started putting together a structure for onboarding and performance tracking. I'd spent so much time reacting to other people's messes. It felt new to build something without a crisis forcing it. That night, I went through the folder one last time. The birthday card, the emails, the screenshots, the letter from my mother. I didn't delete anything. I didn't add anything new. I just went through it page by page and then backed it up to a single flash drive before storing the hard copies away. It wasn't about keeping score. It was about closing the loop. I went out the next morning and bought myself a new coat. I walked to work, picked up coffee from a place I hadn't tried before, sat through meetings without glancing at my phone for updates I knew would never come. This was the first time I wasn't reacting to anything. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't hoping for change. I was just here, doing what needed to be done without anyone rewriting the story behind me. I officially accepted the new leadership position at work on a Tuesday. The offer had been on the table for a while, but I waited until the last bit of onboarding for my team was complete. The role put me in charge of a high-impact development group, working on automation software. It came with a larger office, more responsibility, and the authority to structure things how I wanted. I used to think I'd hate that level of visibility, but this time, it felt earned. There were no strings tied to someone else's chaos. That same week, my lawyer sent me an email marked urgent. Caleb had filed a defamation claim through legal representation. The filing was sloppy, no specific evidence, no actual harm listed, just a vague accusation that I had damaged his professional reputation and standing with family. My name was spelled wrong in 2 places. I forwarded the notice to my employer's legal department. They reviewed it, flagged it as baseless, and documented it as an attempted harassment. They didn't even reach out to Caleb's lawyer, just filed it away under no action necessary. 2 days later, my parents sent out a mass email to me, a few cousins, and my mother's sister. The subject line read, "Urgent Family Matter." The body accused me of intentionally fracturing the family legacy and disrespecting decades of tradition. It listed nothing specific, just phrases like, "After all we've done and when Caleb needed you most." My lawyer drafted a cease and desist addressed to Caleb and sent a copy to both of my parents. The message was clear. All contact attempts needed to stop. Future attempts would be met with formal legal action. It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary they had ignored one too many times. After that, I scrubbed my online presence. I locked down my accounts, updated privacy settings, and removed any old public-facing posts that included my full name or employer. I changed the names on a few user accounts, deleted backup contact emails, and requested a few old posts be removed from outdated forums. I wasn't hiding, I was securing peace. I also went through my phone and laptop. I deleted every photo, video, and folder that involved my parents or Caleb, birthdays, family trips, group selfies from holidays. I cleared them all. I had already backed everything up once before. This time, it wasn't about record keeping, it was about space. That weekend, Vanessa sent me a final message. She said she had accepted a job offer across the country and was relocating in 2 weeks. She thanked me again, not for what I'd done, but for helping her recognize the cycle she'd been stuck in. I replied once, wished her well, and deleted the thread. No unfinished business, no long goodbye. A few days later, I got a message from an old college friend. We hadn't spoken in years. Back then, I vented to him once about how Caleb always seemed to skate by. After that, he slowly faded out. He messaged to say he regretted going silent, said he didn't understand at the time, but now he gets it. We grabbed lunch at a ramen place downtown. He talked about how hard it is to call out dysfunction when it hides behind the word family. I told him about the job, the move, and everything that came after. No bitterness, just facts. By the end, we weren't exactly close again, but there was mutual respect. Sometimes, that's enough. That night, I opened my journal and wrote for the first time in a while. I didn't write about Caleb. I didn't write about my parents. I wrote about the cost of being the one who could handle it, the one they didn't worry about, the one they leaned on, without ever asking how much weight he was already carrying. A few paragraphs in, a pattern clicked. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the strong one. I was the insurance policy, the backup plan, the one they relied on when their golden child couldn't deliver. I opened the document where I'd saved my earlier essay, the one titled, I was the favorite in theory, the backup plan in practice. I deleted it. It didn't tell the full story. I started a new one and titled it, I wasn't the favorite, just the insurance policy. This time, I didn't edit as I went. I didn't worry about who would read it. I just wrote, not to prove anything, not to be understood, just to let it go. A full year passed. The city felt like home now. I had settled into my new role at work and started mentoring newer team members. Most of them didn't know much about where I came from. They just knew me as someone reliable, someone who helped without making it about himself. There were no leftover expectations here, just people doing their jobs and building something real. I hadn't thought about Caleb or my parents in months, not in any active way. They didn't come up in daily conversations, didn't shadow my choices. Their names weren't saved anywhere in my phone. Their photos didn't exist on my walls. Whatever hole they thought they left had already been filled with better things. Routine, growth, peace. Then, one afternoon, I got an email from a small publisher I'd never heard of. It was short and polite. They'd come across a version of an essay I'd once shared anonymously in a closed online circle where I had posted reflections about family dynamics. They said the voice stood out. They wanted to know if I'd consider turning the material into a memoir. I read the email twice, saved it, and never responded. It wasn't anger or hesitation. I just knew I didn't want to shape my story into something digestible for other people. I didn't want it told in chapters. It wasn't a cautionary tale or a dramatic ending. It was something I lived through. That was enough. A few weeks later, I finally took a trip I'd put off for years, just me, a packed hiking bag, in a rented cabin near the base of a mountain trail I'd bookmarked years ago. Growing up, trips like that were always talked down. My parents used to say things like, why waste money to be alone in the woods? Or you should save for real goals. I booked it without telling anyone. The second morning, I hiked halfway up the trail and stopped at a clearing that overlooked a valley. I took a photo, sat for a while, then opened my phone. The last two contacts from my old life, my parents and Caleb, were still there, buried at the bottom of the list. I deleted them one by one. No drama, no second thought, just cleared the screen and kept walking. Back home, I found a voicemail waiting from my mother's sister. She'd left it a few days earlier. She said she wanted to thank me. Watching me step away had helped her do the same. She said, for the first time, she wasn't attending the holiday gathering. She didn't say more than that, but I understood. That week, I closed on the condo. No CO signer, no shared deed, no family money. Paid in full. The paperwork was clean. I walked through the empty space before moving in, ran my hand along the walls, and took a breath. No one knew this address except the people I chose. A few days into unpacking, a new team member at work mentioned something during lunch, growing up with a sibling who always played the victim. She didn't go into details, but I listened. I didn't offer advice. I didn't draw comparisons. I just let her speak. When she was done, I nodded once, and we talked about project timelines instead. The difference was clear. I wasn't carrying the weight of everyone else's mess anymore, and I wasn't passing it on either. My circle now was small, people who didn't need explanations, friends who showed up without trying to fix me, colleagues who respected boundaries without asking for backstories. It wasn't about cutting everyone off. It was about choosing who got to stay. Then, one quiet Thursday, the front desk called. A box had arrived for me, no sender listed. I went downstairs, signed for it, and brought it up to the kitchen counter. It was light. Inside was a framed photo of two boys, me and Caleb, taken when we were maybe 5 or 6. The handwriting on the label was my father's, neat, careful, familiar. I didn't open it fully, just looked at the top layer, then carried it back down and handed it to the building manager. I told them to dispose of it however they usually handle abandoned packages. There was no note inside, no message. Back upstairs, I didn't feel anything heavy. No anger, no pull, just stillness. In therapy that week, my counselor said something I hadn't heard before. Closure isn't the final page. It's when you stop needing one. That night, I wrote a final journal entry. Nothing dramatic, just a sentence. They called me the favorite, but they only loved me when I didn't need anything from them. The story didn't end in a fight. There was no explosion, just space, quiet. A version of life that finally felt like mine.